The past couple of shirim covered the Tosafoes and the Kehilas Yaakov. You have here, let me just review what's going on in the Gemara. Basically, you have a question as to where is the kinyan of the kefil? Where do we acquire the double payment? It's a davar shelo ba'olam. So Rava gave an answer, and Amr gave an answer, but we're really stuck in a certain sense within Manav Shakash. Manav Shakash means either A or B. And if I say A, I have problem C, and if I say B, I have problem D. So it's either A or B, one possibility or the other. Either way I go, I have a problem. So either way you answer, it seems to be problematic. That's what it says at the Gemara. It says, my benaihu. What is the difference between the two? If we want to answer that the kinyan was at the beginning of the kefil, in other words, in the original Metzia, the handing over of the cow, we said the kinyan of the kefil was there for the shomer. So then it comes out that you have a problem with gazilus and vlados. The offspring and the hair that grows off the animal, that seems to be acquired too. We have a brisa that goes against that. Elamai, you'll tell me, no, it happens somak l'geneva, so right before the geneva saw. Fine. So you'll say you'll solve the problem, gazilus and vlados, but your problem is Agam, how is there an acquisition a moment before the theft if the animal happened to be in a makom hefker? There's no way you can have the acquisition. So either way, you're left with a problem. Comes along Rashi, and why don't we just say that the original kinyan was on manas on the condition that it will only happen in 30 days, and that will solve the problem. Why? Because it starts now and it finishes later. If it starts now, that's enough to solve the Agam problem, and if it finishes later, that's enough to solve the Gazilus and Vados problem. Why don't we say like that? So Rashi brings that Gemara in Kesubos that says it doesn't work, and therefore you cannot say it. Tosafoes brings from the same page the Gemara that says that if you said Ma'akshav, it would work. It would work. So Tosafoes brings it as a kasha. I just want to explain why would Rashi bring the case where it doesn't work, and Tosafoes would bring the case of Ma'akshav where it does work. Maybe you could say that since our Gemara doesn't say Ma'akshav, so Rashi wants to explain in the Gemara why this kinyan wouldn't work, where Tosafoes is really bringing an outside Gemara. Tosafoes is bringing Ma'akshav, which is a separate case, and he wants to juxtapose it against this case, but it will solve the problem. If we say Ma'akshav and Shloshim Yom, so we've solved the problem. Why we started, that's enough to solve the Agam problem. And we didn't finish, that's enough to solve the Gazilus and Vlados problem. So Tosafoes says, why don't we say that? Now Tosafoes wants to explain why exactly would it solve the Gazilus and Vlados problem. If you restarted Ma'akshav, maybe you'll get the Gazilus and Vlados because it goes back in time. If it goes back in time, then you get everything in between. Tosafoes wants to bring a raya from Kedushin. Tosafoes brings the famous case from Kedushin that says, if a guy says to a woman, I want to marry you now, and after 30 days, so it starts now and finishes after 30 days. Comes along the second guy, says, I want to marry you now, after the first guy, and he says, I want to be married to you within 20 days, so it's now in 20 days. It comes along the third guy and says, I want to be married now and for 10 days. What's the din? The din is all of them are chal, all these Kedushins work, and the woman winds up being married to 3 guys, and she has to divorce all 3 of them. So Tosafoes has to bring a raya from there that you see that the kinyan is not finished. Even you say now, so it's not finished. If the kinyan is not finished and the acquisition didn't happen yet, it's only happening at the end of the 30 days, or the 20 days, or the 10 days. So therefore you will not get the Gazilus and Vlados, because it's not finished. If there's offspring during that time, or the hair grows during that time, you will not acquire it because the kinyan is not finished. He wants to bring a raya from Gazilus and Vlados. So therefore, Tosafoes has a kasha. Why is our Gemara limited to the 2 kinyanim that we want to say, either from the beginning or just b'somak l'geneva saw, and you wind up with the problem on either side? Forget about those problems. If you say ma'akshav ak shloshim yom, we solve both problems. Tosafoes says maybe you can answer like this. The reason why the Kedushin is chal is because the Kedushin is strong. I'm assuming that we're still holding that there was no kinyan, that the kinyan was not finished. But even if it was not finished, maybe you'll say that the Kedushin is a special reason. Since we're dealing with an Isser here, we're dealing with a very strict problem of an Eshish, a married woman, so maybe you'll say that each one is chal, and therefore limafrei, the thing cannot be okir, the thing cannot be removed. And that's why the woman has to divorce all 3 men. But when it comes to the Vlados, he says it makes a bit of an akimta here. At least those Vlados, or the hair, was already there from the very beginning. and as long as things go along smoothly, everything is going to be Kone. In other words, if you started Ma'akshab and it continues, so then you'll wind up Kone the Gezizos of Lados. If that's true, you don't wind up with a better answer than the Gemara was saying, which was from the beginning. And therefore you have to come onto the Yekimta of Chutz Gezizos of Lados, like we have to make in Rava. So therefore Tosafoes' answer wouldn't be any better. Comes along the Kilas Yaakov wants to explain Tosafoes. Tosafoes thought in the Havamim of his Kasha, when we had the Dimyon between the case of the Gezizos of Lados and the case of the marriage, well, the way it was working was Ma'akshav Shloshim Yom means that at the end of 30 days you're Kone from that point forward, but you never really go back to the beginning. That's why we thought that there was a Dimyon between the two. Because really the kinyan was never finished, and I proved to you that it was never finished from the fact that a second man can come in and mess up the marriage. That would also mean that it wouldn't according to the Gezizos of Lados. But according to the Maskana, the way Tosafoes wants to learn, according to the Kilas Yaakov at least, that the kinyan ma'akshav shloshim yom means that at the end of 30 days, you go back to the very starting point. You go back to the very starting point, so Kedushin, why does it work? Because the fact that it's an Isser and it's stricter, I can't go back 30 days, I can't go back to the beginning and remove what happened in the interim. But that doesn't prove the Gezizos of Lados are not Kone. Why? The Gezizos of Lados will be Kone, since you went back to the original position. If that's true, comes along the Kilas Yaakov and asks the Kashan himself. So why do we limit the case of the Gezizos of Lados to cases where the Gezizos of Lados were actually there at the original kinyan? In other words, you had to have a pregnant cow. You had to have the wool growing on the sheep. You had to have them there. Why would that be true? I thought you went back to the beginning. If you went back to the beginning, you're Kone everything. And that's the Maskana, and that's why we can't use this possibility. Kilas Yaakov explains, no, that even though you truly go back to the very beginning, but the interim spot has been left open. In other words, from day 1 until day 30, that still belongs to the original Baal. Therefore, you had to have the Gezizos of Lados that were there from the time of the original kinyan.